What are your memories of your first flute lesson ever?
I had this amazing, very like quite charismatic Romanian
Uh-huh.
teacher. I'd wanted to play the flute since I was teeny,
Yeah.
tiny. And I at some point I'd like carved a piece of bamboo in the garden. I'd cut holes into it because I really wanted to play.
That
And
is so
and my
cute.
parents were like, "No, you're too young. You've got to wait." And then eventually they bought me a flute actually. But I didn't take lessons for like probably about a
Mm-hmm.
year. So I'd been playing around on the flute and I'd really figured out like how to make a basic sound on the
Yeah.
instrument. So by the time I got to my first lesson, I could kind of make a sound. And I remember I got there, picked up the flute, and I played into the head joint. And he said to me, "It's good, but now make good sound. Make good sound." And I was like, "Okay, I must make a good sound now." And then he said to me, "Okay, we put it together. Let's play."
Did you have any like nerves going into it?
I mean, that's one of the things I just love about kids is that there's just this like incredible fearlessness. I just kind of went with it. You know, it was like every other
Yeah.
experience. I was just like, "Okay, cool, flute lesson, let's do this."
I
Okay.
love it. What was the worst experience of a student's flute going wrong?
Oh, that is great. I sometimes think it's like they do it on purpose, but like minutes before an exam,
Oh no.
they're like, "Man, my flute's broken." And I'm like, I think sometimes they just haven't practiced and then they suddenly start actually practicing the instrument and then the thing falls apart because it's just like, what is this? I think the true worst experience I had was actually a student right before an exam. She put her flute onto the music stand. And all of us know how fickle music stands
Yeah.
are at any music school
Yeah.
ever. And of course, the thing fell off. Something like completely came out of place.
Oh.
Like that flute was no longer playable. That is like my go-to story whenever I'm telling people, do not put your flute on music stands, please.
I just noticed your necklace, by the way. That is super cute.
It's actually a gift from one of my performance classes. We all get together to perform for each other. And as a Christmas gift, they actually sent this. This is an amazing lady who makes it in Michigan, I think.
I love that both of us are wearing like fluty.
I love that shirt. I want to order one. It's so
Thank
cool. You had a crazy flute repair. I would love to hear it.
This was my first student ever. So I was like 17. I was a high school kid, had no idea what I was doing while teaching. I never sat this kid down to teach them how to clean the flute. You know, to a 17-year-old, it just doesn't occur to you. So
But that needs to be learned. Yeah.
she comes in one day and goes, so my baby sister grabbed my flute and
Threw it in the sandbox.
and I was like, I'm sorry.
What?
And then she's like, yeah. And then my mom took the flute and like, it's okay. We
Washed it in the kitchen sink.
Oh, no.
and I was like,
What?
and she's like, yeah, with like soapy water. Yeah.
Oh my word.
Like I literally sat there and was like, am I dreaming? Is this a nightmare? Am I about to wake up? I told them, yo, that's like an at least $200, probably more repair. I don't know which bootleg repair shop they went to, but they managed to get it fixed and playable for $50. For some reason, the flute did play on relatively okay. I don't think it was as good as before, but like at the same time, I'm this 17-year-old. I am still learning to put my foot down about certain things. Ever since that, I don't care if anyone's beginning the flute with me. I sit them down. I'm like, this is how you care for it. You don't do anything else. Nothing else. No water, don't give it a bath, nothing. Just wipe it clean. That's it.
Oh my word. That is quite something. I wonder how did they not have to repad that whole thing? At the same time, like part of me wants to get a really old flute and actually wants to try and do that and see what happens. That would be a really cool video.
I soaked a flute for fun.
I gave my flute a bath. This is what
Yeah. What are your one best and two worst memorable gig experiences?
At the moment, one of my favorite experiences was actually a concert I played a few years ago. It was an open air concert. It was literally sort of like a Schubertiad, kind of like a little gathering. We were all sitting on stage on like sort of couches, relaxed. There was a singer and pianist, and then I was playing with a guitarist. We were playing like little pieces in between. It was this beautiful warm summer evening. You could see the audience there, but there was just these very bright lights. So it was almost like you were in this like cocoon of light. So it was kind of like it was just you on the stage, and then this kind of expansive darkness beyond the stage. And this audience was exquisitely quiet. Like it was just the most unbelievably like beautiful, magical performance experience. One of my weirdest ones, back in when I was still at university, we used to play, they would get like a whole bunch of the music students together to play for the graduations.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had that too.
They asked me to play, I don't know if you know The Great Train Race by Ian Clarke.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, it's got like these crazy special effects and all these like really weird sounds. Mm-hmm. And about halfway through this piece, there was like a commotion in the crowd. One of the graduates basically collapsed, passed out and collapsed. At which point I'm like, what do I do? You know, you're taught the show must go on, you know, you just keep going. And then I carried on playing for a little bit, but it started getting really awkward because everybody was looking at this guy collapsed on the ground.
While you're going,
and eventually I sort of just faded it out, and it was very, very awkward. But then, of course, the joke was for a while that I killed somebody. He didn't die. He was fine. One of his friends specifically wanted to let me know, sent through a message specifically for me to say that I didn't kill his friend, wasn't my fault. But it was kind of the joke of the whole college. The concert coordinator at the music school, she said she's going to have to put like disclaimers onto the program. It was a joke, but you know, beware of the flute playing can cause serious harm. There's that meme where like talking about coughing into the elbow and then holding the flute. Everyone was sending me photos. I was like, oh.
What's the absolute weirdest party trick you can do on the flute?
It's a weird party trick that I have because of the flute. It was a very specific pen lid. I could play whole songs just on a pen lid. At some point I'm going to have to find, it was a very specific pen lid and I haven't found it since, but I spent literally hours showing everyone. I was like, look, I can play songs on a pen lid. I think in terms of like specific flute tricks.
You know, like the weird stuff that people teach you in band rehearsals during break? You know, that type of stuff?
I actually have.
Yeah.
This is a friend of mine showed me this in orchestra. We would sit and play like this. I actually show this to some of my students sometimes because it's the demonstration of how you don't need to be so tight in your embouchure. But basically, I call it the Bugs Bunny flute. So here goes.
I've never seen that before.
But now I need to know your party trick.
Let me grab an old flute because you should never do this to a good flute. This flute needs a huge overhaul, so I don't think this is going to do much damage to this anyway. This is one of those stupid things that we learn to do during band breaks. You take your flute and then you can buzz into it from the top like a trumpet.
That's amazing. It's a trumpet. The kid in me is like, I want to try it. I'm like, nope, not on my flute.
What was the worst flute sticker shock experience?
It's a weird thing for me as a South African because we translate everything over into rands. For example, $10,000 flute is about 150,000 rand, which is a lot of money. I think in South Africa, there are probably about like maybe 5 people, if even that play on like gold instruments, for example.
Yeah.
So up until that point, I don't even think, it wasn't even in my like awareness because I was like, that's never going to happen. And so I think when I first looked at the price of like a gold flute, I think I pretty much fell off my chair.
I did too.
I was quite involved in the process of buying my instruments as I kind of upgraded.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of helped me to have an awareness of what instruments costed. Funnily enough, though, the thing that has kind of blown my mind, I mean, when I bought my instrument, it now costs about double what I paid for it because of the exchange rate differences. Which is mind-blowing.
Did you end up seeing that like online, like that price point online?
You're not going to just find a flute shop with that caliber of instruments in a shop here. You're just not. You custom order the instruments, maybe buy it secondhand from someone who's got one. I think my biggest thing was when I went overseas. I played on some of these instruments and was like, okay, wow. Like, I'm holding like a down payment to a house in my hands.
This is like dumb teenager me again. I went to, so far as I know, the one and only Vancouver Flute Festival. And it was because Sir James Galloway was coming into town. For the first time, I was able to go to a flute festival that was near me. All these people brought in flutes from like all the big shops in North America. I didn't even know how crazy it was that I got to try it then, but I got to try the Brannon Kingma flute.
Oh, wow.
It's the one with the quarter tones and stuff like that.
The Kingma system, yeah. Ah, that's cool.
At that point, I knew it was special, but I didn't understand just how special it was that I could try one in my lifetime until like way, way later. I was like, oh, wait a second. That was actually a really special experience. It was a gold flute. And I fell in love with just how it felt. So I asked like how much it is. And so this was back in like mid 2000s. And she said, 38,500. And I'm guessing she was quoting it in US dollars. So it's even more in Canadian. I was like, oh, so I literally just like put it down and like backed away. You know, especially for a 16-year-old, like that amount of money is like not even fathomable.
Now that you mention it, I actually just had a memory of a colleague of mine, also in high school. It was a friend of mine. She was playing a muramatsu, and she let me try out her instrument. And I remember thinking, oh, this is the most amazing instrument. I was just like, this is so incredible. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I think I also had that moment of looking at the price and thinking, this is never going to happen. And that's not even, that's no 38,000. That's like $7,000. And back then it was even less.
I was very lucky to kind of have like grow up in my formative years, my teenage years, in a place where there was quite the saturation of flutists. At the same time, what I'm starting to also recognize is that it doesn't matter. If you're young, you don't know squat.
That should be on a t-shirt.
If you're young, you don't know squat, you know? Like you can be in a place with like the closest access to all of these things. And you can still not know.
I remember when I was in high school, I sat in a masterclass with Trevor Y. He'd come to Cape Town and he was doing a class, he was doing master classes, and I was sitting there and I was like, okay, this seems like a cool dude. Now I'm like, oh my goodness.
That was a once in a lifetime experience, right?
All the questions I could have asked him.
Well, those are my questions for now. I'm gonna save the rest for next time, so. Your turn.
Okay, great. I'm gonna throw some of mine in. Okay, so my first question is, when